training school. And when I got down there, they diagnosed me as having a degeneration of one of my corneas, which is obviously not a good thing for a fighter pilot. So they gave me my honorable discharge. They gave me $300 in discharge pay. I had a 1966 Dodge Dart with no air conditioning. I had one suit, and I had nowhere else to go. And so I took that Dodge Dart and I drove from Pensacola Naval Air Station down to Tampa, Florida, where I had a fraternity brother from Penn State who had just got married. The last thing his wife wanted to see was me. With good reason. They got divorced about a year later. So I don't think that had anything to do with it. He moved about 6 months later, and then I didn't know anybody in this town. So I slept on their couch and then moved to a small apartment, really not knowing anybody. So my journey in this community is not that much different than some of you. You know, who came from another country, not knowing what you were going to experience when you got here, not knowing anybody necessarily, but willing to work hard and to scratch and claw your way to where you are now. You know, and here I am, some 25 years later, 30 years later, as the mayor of the 55th largest city in the country. And darn proud and thankful for the opportunity to do it. As many of you know, I've been in a lot of campaigns over the years. Many of you have been with me every step of the way. They weren't all successful. You know, when I got into this mayor's race in 2010, the consensus in the community was I didn't stand a chance in hell of winning. And many of you will remember, I was running against Mayor Greco, you know, a 4-time former mayor, an icon in this community, as well as 2 other people who had never lost a political campaign. And they said when I got in, they said, Bob, look, and remember, I had run in 2003 and lost to Mayor Iorio. They said, Bob, you can't possibly win this race. There is no way that you can win. You're done. Even my wife said that. The kids were a little shaky, but they were 7. They said, you can't possibly win. You can't possibly beat Joe Greco. You can't possibly beat anybody in this race. You're a nice guy, but you are finished. Your political career is over. Your time has come and gone. And I said, look, I understand why you think that way. But what you don't understand is I don't fear losing because I have felt losing. And I know that losing doesn't kill you. Amen. Losing just makes you stronger. It makes you tougher. It makes you, if you're doing it for the right reasons, get off that mat and get back in the game and wipe the blood off your face. And what they also didn't understand was I had skin in the game. I had a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old. 2 little girls. That's how I know God's a woman. This is the price I paid for not getting married until I was 40. I had skin in the game. And I wasn't going to lose my kids to Charlotte, North Carolina, or to Atlanta, Georgia, or to Austin, Texas, or to Raleigh, Durham, all of the other emerging Sunbelt cities where there were jobs and there were opportunities for our best and brightest young people. I wasn't going to do it. So we set out on a journey. We didn't have the most money. There were 2 other candidates in the race who had way more money than I did. But I went out along with our volunteers and we knocked on 20,000 doors. Through the heat of the summer, I showed up at Chris Cano's house in Wellswood. Saturday morning, I'm in my boxers. Which, by the way, is not a pretty sight. I met every dog in the city, but that was even scarier. To see Chris come to the door in his boxers. Well, we knocked on 20,000 doors, and what we said was, look, we need you to believe in the capacity of this city to be great. We need you to believe that we don't have to settle for second best anymore. That we're not playing second fiddle to anybody. That we're not going to let Charlotte, North Carolina, and some of these other cities steal our best and brightest kids and never return. I said, you don't have to settle for mediocrity. I'm asking you to believe in the capacity of Tampa, Florida to be a great city. Now, how many of you remember when in the 80s and 90s when they used to call this place America's Next Great City. Maybe you remember that. I can tell who's been here for a long time. Yeah, some of the signs are still up. Well, somehow along the way, we kind of lost our way. Somehow along the way, we stopped believing that we could be that great city. Somehow along the way, we started to settle for any kind of job. Somehow along the way, we started to believe that there were other places that were better equipped than us, that had more potential than us, that were going to surpass us, and we were okay just being mediocre. My kids aren't going to come home to a mediocre city, neither are yours. So we set out on that journey 20,000 doors later. On April 1st, when we were sworn in as the mayor of this city, after winning the runoff by 63% of the vote, and they said that we could not win. That was a lesson in perseverance for everyone in this community who's ever been knocked down, for anyone who's ever been told that they can't do anything, for anyone who's ever been told that their English is not good enough, that they need to go somewhere else, for anyone who's ever been kicked, and kicked hard, and said that you weren't going to succeed. I am living testimony to tell you that with hard work and with a vision, you can be anything that you want to be. But let me tell you where we are now. This city, to paraphrase Alicia Keys, this town is on fire. There is a buzz about this community that hasn't existed in 20 years. There's an electricity, there's a sense of optimism, there's a sense of hope. There's a sense that this is finally our moment. I mean, you think about it. We've been through the worst recession since the Great Depression. And I know folks are hurting out there. But I can tell you that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Things are absolutely getting better. Building permits are up. Residential's up 25%. Commercial construction is up 20%. Just last week, I was with the governor when we announced 1,000 new jobs that are being created. Coincidentally, he'll never admit it, but it's because of the Affordable Health Care Act. That's right. Tampa Bay's created more jobs in the last year than any place in the state of Florida. We're leading the state out of this recession, and I think over the next decade, south of Atlanta, we're going to be the economic engine that drives the entire Southeast. Right. Just a year ago, we stood on the international stage like we have never stood before. When we hosted the Republican National Convention, there were 15,000 members of the media that were here in Tampa, Florida. Not just the political media. This is the media from all over the world. So they weren't just watching us in Indiana. They were watching us in India. And if you think about 4 years ago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, 800 arrests, millions of dollars in property damage. In Tampa, Florida, your Tampa, in the face of a hurricane, 2 arrests, 0 property damage. We told the world exactly what this city is capable of doing. We hosted that international event better than it has ever been done before. And I will tell you that we are not asking anybody's permission anymore. It is full throttle for this community. And we told the world. We told the world that this is Tampa's time. You may not have believed that this mid-sized American city could host this event. The second most viewed television event in the entire world last year other than the Olympics. You may have said that, look, these conventions go to New York or Chicago or LA. But I'm here to tell you that Tampa, Florida stood up when the world was watching and performed better than we have ever done before. As a result of that, next spring, for the first time the event has ever been hosted in the United States, we're going to be hosting in Hollywood the Indian Film Festival. Not yet. Yeah, that's right. I will wear a sarong if I have to.
They hold you that.
I will. I will do whatever I have to do for my city, within reason. But the Indian Film Festival is about 3 times the size of Hollywood.
Yes.
And there is a worldwide following for Indian films. It is a huge industry. They're going to be coming here for the first time they've ever hosted it in the United States. We're going to roll out the green carpet. because that's what they do at the Indian Film Festival. And there'll be tens of thousands of Indians, not to mention a worldwide audience, that will be here in Tampa, Florida, for that 4-day period that once again allows us to go on the international stage and tell our story. Republican National Convention, there were 10 billion mentions of Tampa and Tampa Bay in the international press as a result of the push on that event. That event generated in short term real capital infusion into the local economy, upwards of $200 million for that week. When you add the economic spinoff as a result of that, that number's up around $400 million. $400 million was infused into the local economy as a result of us hosting that event. Were there inconveniences? Sure. Did I lock the town down? Yeah, I did. But it was a safe city. And I wasn't going to allow those folks who were going to come here and tear things up. Believe me, they were here. I was not going to allow them to do to our town what they did to Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I will take the criticism of an overwhelming police presence any day of the week because our city was safe and I could sleep well at night. And you guys knew that that was not going to happen in this community. But things like that pay long-term dividends. Sure, they're a lot of work. We trained for a year and a half to be ready for that. We trained to de-escalate conflict. We knew that these anarchists were going to come to town to try and provoke a reaction from the police department so that they could get that video up on YouTube and advocate their causes all over the globe. We knew that. We knew they were coming. We knew what their tactics were. We knew who they were. We had officers and FBI agents embedded in the Occupy movement for months at a time before this event. I'll tell you a funny story. By the end of the third day of the convention, we had them so outmanned and outgunned and out-thought, as my 7-year-old will say, out-deployed, that they didn't know whether they were coming or going. And so by the end of the third day, we were feeding. They were that disheveled and that disorganized. But on that fourth day, they were going to make their last stand. They were going to come. They were camped out at a place called Romneyville. Coincidentally, that's what they called it. That was not my time. They were all camped out there. It was at the corner of downtown. We knew what was going on because there were officers that were embedded in there. They were going to make their last stand. And they were going to come down Tampa Street. And they were going to try and provoke a confrontation at the intersection of Tampa and Kennedy Boulevard. And part of the tactics were to shut down the intersection and disrupt traffic and try and provoke the police into reacting. So here they come, down Tampa Street. There's a couple hundred of them coming. The bike units, you guys all saw the bike units during the convention. Those bike units were very effective tools in helping to steer and to move the protesters, both the legitimate protesters who were just there because they wanted to offer an alternative thing, as well as the ones who were there to cause problems. Coming down Tampa Street, the bike units move in at the corner of the intersection of Kennedy and Tampa to try and steer them back up Kennedy Boulevard. I'm right down there in the middle of it behind the biggest cop I can find. I'm no dummy. Bike units move in. The officers in the turtle gear, the riot gear that you saw, with all the body armor on there, the shin guards and their elbow pads, they move in behind the bike units because we fully anticipate that this is going to be their last shot. They are going to try and provoke a confrontation. So they come in and they sit down right in the middle of the intersection. And they don't smell too good because they've been living outdoors for a while. It's hot. They sit down right in the middle of the intersection, and there's a bunch of them that are getting right up in the face of these police officers, yelling the most vile things that you can possibly imagine. They were calling these cops anything but a child of God. They were talking about their mother. I mean, it was really vile stuff. I'm right behind the biggest one. This one anarchist comes up to this officer. He must have been about 6'6", and then he had all his turtle gear on, which made him even more imposing. This guy yelled all kinds of stuff, trying to provoke this officer to do something. He has this, what looks like a fishing pole with a string with a donut at the end. And he's getting in this cop's face saying, you know, you fat pig, you blankety blank blank, you know that you want to eat this donut because that's all you cops do is eat donuts. And the officer, we had trained everyone to de-escalate. He was calm as could be. He looks at me. He said, Mayor, I said, I'm a cop. I know donuts. said, that's not a donut. That's a bagel painted to look like a donut. The end result? 2 arrests, 0 property damage. These guys, Jay Caston and David G. did a great job. And let me tell you a little bit about what's going on in this community. And I'll be brief because I know some of you will want to ask questions. I'm sure baseball will be one. This city really has come alive. There is more demand for housing, particularly in the urban core, specifically downtown, and there's more demand than there is supply. I mean, people are flocking, particularly the young professionals that we desperately want to attract to this community. Not only our kids and our grandkids, but the best and the brightest from all over the country and all over the globe. Now, these young people, this intellectual capital, it's not like my father's generation where they were restricted to a city because that's where the auto plant was or that's where the steel plant was. You know, their value and their worth was contained in their arms. These young people today, their intellectual capital is contained in their head. They can live anywhere they want to live. And they oftentimes will make their decisions about where to live based on the environment. Whether the downtown is a hip, alive downtown with retail and very pedestrian friendly, where they can live, work, and play in the same environment, where they don't have to have a car. You know, where they can write software code all night and windsurf all day. Where there's like-minded peers. Where there's a community that recognizes that our diversity is a strength. I'm not going to be the mayor of a city that demonizes people based on race, creed, or color, or ethnicity, or the God they worship, or who they love. I'm just not going to do it. We are so much stronger together. We are so much better together. That is what makes this city special. Unlike most, particularly southern cities. I mean, we were settled by Cuban, Italians, Spanish immigrants, Jewish merchants, African Americans who were brought here not of their own volition, scattering a few Irishmen, usually in the pubs. We are different. We look like America. And that is what makes us more competitive. When we're out there pitching this community for corporate relocations, these companies want to know that their employees are going to come to this community and be respected, and the value of each individual is going to be the same as anyone else's. They want to know, these young people, that this is a place that has opportunities. Not just make work, not just necessarily service work, but real opportunities that will allow them to create real value, real wealth, and real corporations. So part of our challenge is changing Tampa's economic DNA. Part of the challenge is if we're going to compete with Austin, Texas, and Raleigh, Charlotte, North Carolina, is that we've got to take the built-in advantages that we have here, the economic engines that drive this economy, some of which are small businesses, others of which are much bigger. When you think about the University of South Florida, do you know that there's over $400 million in federal research money that goes directly to the University of South Florida? And you're thinking to yourself, Mayor, why does that matter? At one point, 60% of the gross domestic product in Silicon Valley, the mecca of technology, was directly attributed to Stanford University. So the academics that are doing this research, whether it's at Moffitt Cancer Center, whether it's at Tampa General, whether it's at USF, the key is to find a way to move it out of the academic world, move it out of the petri dishes in the lab, and move it out to the marketplace to create companies, to create jobs, to create opportunities, and that will allow us to compete for these best and brightest kids that want to come and be a part of this. So we have really focused on creating an environment in downtown Tampa that encourages that. We've got 3 new residential towers that are slated to come out of the ground within the next 6 months. That's going to add another 1,500 residents to downtown Tampa. In 2002, when I left office, there were 600 people who lived downtown. 300 of them live in the Morgan Street jail. True story. Now, when you add Harbor Island into the mix, you're looking at close to 15,000 people that are living downtown, and more to come. The old federal courthouse on Florida Avenue. Those of you that have grown up here remember that magnificent building. 10, 12 years ago, the federal government gave it to the city of Tampa, and it sat vacant for a decade. It was basically rotting. The roof was leaking, it had mold, it had asbestos. We put a request for proposals out on the street. Got a developer in here from Memphis, Tennessee, who's going to take that most significant building in our downtown environment and turn it into a 120-room boutique hotel. It is going to be spectacular. The old, those of you who have been here for a long time, remember the IBM building at the corner of Ashley and Kennedy on the river. It's been vacant 6-7 years. Developers in there right now is going to turn it into an aloft hotel, another 110 rooms on the river. The Riverwalk, 6 mayors and 40 years in the making. Thanksgiving of next year, we're going to cut that ribbon to finish that Riverwalk. We will have you're going to have 2.5 miles of uninterrupted access to the Riverwalk that will go from the Strass Performing Arts Center all the way around to the History Center. Richard Donsmore, his family. We took an old waterworks building up in the Tampa Heights area on the north end of the river. Put out a request for proposal. I chose Richard and the Donsmore family to do a chop house and an oyster bar on the river. The city's going to go in and redo Waterworks Park right next to it. There is a natural spring there that provided a lot of the water during the 1940s and 1950s for the city of Tampa. It's still there, but it's been clogged up and blocked up and full of trash. We're digging that out. Richard is contemplating using that water from that spring to create his own craft beer. But there'll be a whole new park there, and that will create the energy up on the north end. So I think that whole Tampa Heights area is absolutely ripe for redevelopment. It was in bankruptcy, like a lot of projects were, as a result of the economy. It's now out of bankruptcy. Two fellows have it under control, and they're looking to do some pretty creative things. Now, that waterfront is the best asset that we have downtown. Absolutely the best asset. That's what makes us different from a lot of cities. For decades, we turned our back on the waterfront. If you grew up here, you remember when it was a working wharf, when they used to have the ships bringing stuff from Cargill and bringing flour in for the Cargill plant. There were rats as big as houses running right around there. We turned our back on the waterfront. That's changing. 5 years from now, that river is going to be the center of our downtown, not the western edge. It is not going to be a barrier anymore. It is going to be the best asset that we have in all the development that we are focusing now is going to be river centered. Look at Curtis Dixon Park. Pam Iorio did an amazing job setting the table for the success of that park. That was brilliant. That is now the city's front lawn. That is now the great common meeting area where you can do anything from salsa to funk fest to my favorite, the Mayor's River of Green. That's what happens when you elect a leprechaun mayor. 3 years ago, compared to now, we put 500,000 people into organized events in Curtis Dixon Park. And you know what happens when people walk down there? And I love seeing this. Sometimes I'll put a baseball cap on and some sunglasses and I kind of eavesdrop and hope they don't recognize me. And what happens is, particularly for a lot of folks who have not been downtown in a while, or have not been down in Curtis Dixon Park, or have not been there in the evening when the minarets are lit up, when agualustas, I know it's bad Spanish, but what do you expect from me? The bridges that we lit up, and the Tampa Museum that's lit up, and the Children's Museum that's lit up, and they walk down to Curtis Dixon Park, and they go down to that Riverwalk, and they look around, and they say inevitably, wow, I never knew this existed. We're changing this town. We've started on the west bank of the Hillsborough River. Do you know that from Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park, I want you to come on a journey with me. And it's hard to imagine because you can't see the river from North Boulevard. Now you guys all know where Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park is? It's the one right next to Tampa Prep, right up from UT. Huge 25-acre park that you can't even see the water. The design of that park, they've got these alien space mounds in there that block the view of everything. It's totally underutilized. Unless you're a prostitute or a drug dealer. We're going to go in and rebuild that park. And we're going to make it as attractive and a bookend for Curtis Dixon. But if you follow me up the river, you know where Rick's on the River is? Anyone know Rick's on the River? All of that property behind Rick's on the River, going all the way to Rome Avenue, including North Boulevard Homes, the public housing projects, 140 acres is entirely owned by some governmental agency. You know how much that entire 148 acres throws off in property taxes? Not as much as Derek Jeter's house. Merely $150,000 a year. We're working with the Housing Authority to demolish North Boulevard homes, to rebuild an environment out there that is conducive to those young kids having any chance in life. We're going to, the schools will remain there. The city owns about 14 acres up behind it that we park trucks on. Our water and sewer yard is up there. I mean, that's acreage, that's a block off the river, that's high and dry, that's got some of the best view corridors into downtown. If you look at Main Avenue, you look at Howard and Armenia, formerly the focal point for West Tampa, historic West Tampa, we're going to get in and master plan and redevelop that entire stretch. All of that. Now, it's very ambitious, I know. But I didn't run to be mediocre. So we're going to get this done. It may take a while, and it won't be without some angst. But we're going to get it done because this is the right thing to do, not only for the people that live there that deserve a better chance, but for the opportunity to create an entire live, work, and play environment where people can live in those neighborhoods, walk to work downtown, ride their bike to downtown, leave their car downtown. It will energize the entire North Hyde Park area, literally from Howard and Armenia, where the old armory is going to be taken over by the Jewish Community Center and turned into a very, very nice community center, all through that North Hyde Park area. The University of Tampa is expanding by leaps and bounds. Tampa General Hospital acquired the old Furman automobile site that sits vacant now to do an administrative hospital and a rehab hospital. You're going to create a whole medical educational component in that North Hyde Park area, and that means jobs, and that means opportunities, and that means a livable, walkable neighborhood. Now, I'm just not settling for beating Charlotte. We're going to take on the world. We've got the largest port in the state of Florida. 5,000 acres. Bigger than Miami, bigger than Jacksonville, bigger than any place in the state of Florida. When the Panama Canal opens up, and the size of those post-Panamax freighters are tripled, the amount of container business that is capable of coming to the Port of Tampa is exponentially larger than what it is. That huge construction project that you see going over I-4 that all of us drive on and go, man, how do they do that? I know I do. I hope they're not off on the connections, because if they do, they're in big trouble. That was federal money that came from the Obama administration. So don't ever tell me, or don't let anybody tell you that investment in infrastructure doesn't pay dividends. You know what that means for the Port of Tampa? That means you'll be able to get trucks, as opposed to having to come right down the street, right past the Columbia restaurant, occasionally running into the Columbia restaurant, out of Ybor City. You get those trucks from the Port of Tampa to the state of Maine without a single traffic light. That is speed to market. That's what makes us more competitive, is our ability to get goods to market. Whether it's by a truck or the CSX rail line that's now connected into the port, these containers can be offloaded, either put on trucks, uninterrupted to wherever they want to go, or put on a rail corridor and a rail truck, rail train, and sent out. Tampa International Airport. Huge economic engine for us. Very ambitious plans over the next 15 to 20 years. Probably tripling the size of TIA. We've got great new leadership there. Think about this. One of the reasons why the magic is working there is because we're not fighting about the same old stupid stuff. No one cares who's a Democrat or Republican. No one cares who's rural, who's urban. No one cares who's city, who's county. The city isn't fighting with the county commission anymore. I mean, those days are beyond us. We can't afford